Welcome everyone to Buddhist Center. We're so fortunate today to be able to look at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, the Lamrim Chemo, this text that Khensa Rinpoche spent so much time focusing on and just reinforcing to us the importance of knowing the contents of this text. Because Rinpoche said over and over again, if we know Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chemo, if we know the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and we understand the meaning of it completely, we understand all of Lord Buddha's teachings. We understand all of the teachings that can be found in the Kangjur, the 100 volumes of text and the pronouncements of Lord Buddha. We understand all of the teachings found in the Tanjur, the authentic Indian commentaries where we find 213 volumes. So it's amazing that we can take one text and as a result of just taking this one text, if we have the ornaments around it, that reinforce our understanding of the intent Lama Tsongkhapa had and the implicit teachings that are within it, we're able to understand the 84,000 or 80,000 bundles of scripture that Lord Buddha taught. So this is how important this text is, and this is why Rinpoche, Khensa Geshe Wandak, reinforced it over and over again and taught it for so many years, just dedicated to Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. But if we look at the span of the time he spent with us, the 25 years, he came and taught us the smaller Lamrims. He taught us Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, which is really the root text for the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, according to Tsongkhapa, along with Abhisama Alamkara. And, in terms of the smaller Lamrims that Tsongkhapa wrote, he taught us the abbreviated stages of the path, the smallest Lamrim, the Lamrim Dudun, Lamrim Nyamjur, and also the source of all my good or foundation of all good qualities, Yunten Chijarma. And then Rinpoche also is so kind to teach us the text that's connected to this in a lot of ways, the Lamsam Namsam, Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal paths. And then we were so fortunate that Rinpoche taught us Lama Tsongkhapa's Dendel Dopa, the praise of dependent origination, praise to Buddha Shakyamuni for teaching dependent origination. So all of these texts that he taught us and all of the themes within the Lojong of Geshe Chikawa's text, the 7-point thought transformation, and the Geshe Langri Tamba's text, the 8 verses for training the mind, and Nam Kapel's text, Mind Training Like the Rays of the Sun, all of these themes that Rinpoche taught us over the 25 years, he always brought back to the teachings for beings of three capacities. So before we go any further, I would just like to say thank you for listening. This gives me an opportunity to investigate these topics more. And I've really just rejoiced in the fact that we've all, many of us spent so much time with Khensa Geshe Wandak and had these stages of the path clarified and reinforced for us, and I'm just grateful that I can share this with you today. So, Laike dan lu dan jin ye zhubun da da mi ke nan dan zhuwa gun ji zhan nan ji tsang ba dan je ge du da ji ju den do. In the language of the gods, Nagas and Yaksas, in the language of demons and humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. And this is from the prayer of noble conduct, the Sanchu Molam. It's a Shilukachi. It's one stanza from the Sanchu Molam. So this is how many teachers start their teachings, and we've explained for a few classes now why we do this and how this relates to our when we think about our practice. It relates to our inviting all sentient beings when we're at a teaching to be here with us, or when we're doing our practice, when we're inviting all sentient beings. This relates to it because when we become a Buddha, we will be able to relate to every single sentient being in their own individual languages and be able to speak that to them and answer their questions to their scope specifically. And if 1 billion beings all asked simultaneously different questions, the Buddha would be able to give one response that would answer their questions in their own individual languages and answer their specific questions. So this is something that is incredible, that a being who is omniscient, who's able to have a Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya can do. So a Buddha, is able to emanate. A Buddha is able to, do so many things that are just unimaginable to a person like me. But as I study more and more and more, the possibility of it, the fact that it's a phenomena that is possible, Yimbi Sipi Sheja, it becomes possible, this idea of omniscience, this idea of Buddhahood. But it's only been reinforced, and the possibility of some of these more kind of subtle things being true has only come from my studying the more foundational things that kind of show me through logic and reasoning that some of the other, heavier, more advanced topics are true. And unfortunately, I don't have, the ability to say, oh, well, I've realized, through inference, these kind of hidden topics that Buddha has taught about emptiness and about subtle impermanence. So therefore, I can conclude that the Buddha is definitely right about everything else. I can't claim to have spent that much time to be able to infer those things in a way it's incontrovertible. But what I can say is that I've spent enough time with more basic things that allow me to think that realizing these hidden things through inference is possible, and that then, these other things that are kind of further out there that I can't even begin to understand, I have faith in. Kind of a faith of, where I, aspire to want to be able to understand it. It's not just an admiring faith, it's a faith of aspiration that I've generated, but it really isn't founded in everything that it should be, and that's why I continue to practice and continue to investigate the teachings, so that I'll eventually reach a point where I can say, yes, these extremely hidden teachings are feasible. And Aryadeva's 400 verses says that, when if you're having trouble believing the very extremely hidden things the Buddha taught, think about the hidden things that were taught that you can rely on reasoning and understanding, and then conclude that the other things are good. But I've been able to just see the logic and reasoning just as a general formula within the Nalanda tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Buddha Shakyamuni's tradition, the logic and reasoning that just doesn't allow for corners to be cut and doesn't allow for any kind of BS to make its way across the finish line, because there's so many skilled pandits and so many people, since Buddha Shakyamuni has kept these views intact, and made sure that views that were maybe lost were because of the ignorance of the world, beings like Nagarjuna were able to bring and clarify and bring light back to views that were misunderstood and clarify them so that people could really understand the intent of Buddha Shakyamuni at its highest level in terms of the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. So we're so fortunate that we're here today, and we can relate to these various levels of teachings and understandings. And as a result of this relationship that we have with this pure truth, with Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings, with the Indian Pandits, with these incredible Tibetan lamas, as a result of having these in our lives and being able to know that they've really met acid tests, then we have information that we can then acid test, and we can make sure that it meets our acid test, not only some other Indian Pandits or Tibetans or someone else's acid test. All of this information needs to meet our acid test. But the great thing about it is the acid test that the others have used is very thorough. And it tests it from every single angle you could ever look at it from. So you're getting information that has been vetted pretty well for you to acid test, for you to see if it rings as true. The Buddha never said have blind faith, or just have blind faith in Nagarjuna or a Sangha, just have blind faith in him or her. No, the Buddha said about my own teachings, don't just have faith in me because I'm the Buddha. Just like if someone tells you that there's gold, apparently they were selling lots of fake gold in the markets as you were walking around, and they would put, gold, covered, things with clay or sand in the middle or something like this, I've heard. And someone buying gold would cut it and rub it, make sure it wasn't just, some sort of veneer or paint of gold, like a gold leaf on something that's not gold solid. So they cut it, make sure it's gold all the way. They'd rub it. They check this thing every single way possible to make sure that it's gold. Likewise, once we get this information like I'm presenting today, then we do this same thing that an intelligent person buying gold in a shady market, because the spiritual market is a shady market, a lot of untruth there. So we're walking into a place where there's a lot of untruth and a lot of misunderstanding of truth, and even written misunderstanding by our heroes. So we're walking into a market where there's a whole lot of stuff going on, and we're looking for that really specific truth, that specific, when we're looking at emptiness, what is the object of negation? And if we aren't cutting and rubbing as we're looking at gold, if we're not analyzing and looking at it in every single way, we're not doing our job. And then information that is incorrect or slightly incorrect could become our information. So we want our information to become information that's reality. And that's why we look at all of these different tenet systems, and we make sure that all of these things that we call lower schools aren't exactly what we believe internally, because we feel we hold this high view, whereas in a lot of cases, having not looked at the tenet systems, it would be impossible to truly hold a very, very high view unless you had some sort of like wicked, like special karmic imprints, like Milarepa-esque karmic imprints that would allow you to just quickly realize things. So it's going to require this cutting and rubbing, requires, looking at all these different things, because really what you're doing is cutting and rubbing, trying to find the gold in your mind, trying to find, that pure view that will allow the seed of perfection to ripen. And that pure thing that you're trying to find is in a market that's selling 100 million things that aren't that. And you're just trying to find that. So in this market, you're receiving information, and the cutting and rubbing is the analysis that you do to make sure that you end up, by looking at, okay, well, this person refined this view in this way. Oh, well, I previously held this. Now there's a consequence to my view I see being put forth by this higher tenet system. Now you're able to take your kind of, conclusion and change it, because your conclusion was wrong because it's been negated. There's a consequence to the conclusion that you've made. So this is what this cutting and rubbing it is about. This information that you're going to hear today is information that you then take to the table of analysis, that you then take and investigate. You do your own kind of experimentation on this with your own mind. You experiment with this object of negation. You experiment with the possible ways that an I could inherently exist. And you start to be able to, as a yogi does, take objects such as the self of person and self of phenomenon, and start to look at them and blow their objective existence away, like they're just sandcastles being washed away, or blown away like a house of cards in the wind, or just a leaf pile being blown away by a gust of wind that looked like it was one whole mass. And you start to see that there's no inherent mass in it. And it's almost like, you see like sorcerers, yogis, not me, yogis, people who are really realized, can start to just look at objects of observation and start to use the same analysis that they've used perhaps on the self of person, and just start to destroy the objective existence that they cling to related to every object around them. And then this just reinforces it and reinforces it. And eventually there can be a direct experience of it. But that's not for this moment. So let's just get into a 7-point Vairocana posture that we've gotten into many times before in order to get our minds into a more calm and realistic state. This is, I won't go over the details of this just to save time, because I gave a longer explanation about cutting and rubbing it. So let's get into the 7-point Vairocana posture, and let's focus on the breath, breathing in and out, rounds of breath and counting. And then also we'll have the front generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni, beautiful and radiant, but static. You always want to have your kind of fixed meditation when you're using an object in a front generation form to be static. There may be a tendency to want to animate the object. And in other, practices we do, when we think of the merit field, it's animated, and we're imagining them as real beings, just animated and lively. But in this case, when we're trying to get fixed meditation, we want that animation to stop, and we need a fixed kind of picture of the object, three-dimensional, but fixed, that isn't moving around. And then the details of it, as we get better and better and our minds become calmer and calmer, will be filled in. So Tsongkhapa says, don't, ruin your meditation by trying to make your object, if it's Buddha Shakyamuni, perfect. It may start out with just like the kind of outline, like a silhouette. Some of the teachers say it could just start out as that. As long as, your mind is staying on that outline, and it isn't, mixed up, going excited, and isn't scattered, or, isn't, sleepy or dull, you're doing your job at an entry level. You're starting to really fix an object, and that object, you'll be able to, with repeated looking at whatever, that'll help you, because you're off not meditating time, not doing mind you look at this object, and then you'll find as your mind is calmer, the object will naturally fill in. It just will. So don't fixate initially on getting it exactly perfect. And Tsongkhapa says not to do that, but also don't cut yourself so much slack that you are not trying to. Clarity is also about detail. So when we say we want to get it as calm as possible and as clear as possible, detail, it says you'll be able to get, your image to the size of a mustard seed, maybe a whole mandala the size of a mustard seed. But initially you're going to maybe see a silhouette of something, maybe a blob, warmth, a kind of warm light. And Geshe Dorje Damdu actually has you start breathing and meditating on like a white kind of dot right here. And then he has other instructions that he gives to people personally from there. But it's interesting how your meditation doesn't start out as this fancy, okay, now I have Tara right in front of me, just like she's just right there, but she's static. Now I have Buddha Shakyamuni right in front of me, just like he's there. Some people really have vivid imaginations, I find, and can do better with this. But the folks who have those really vivid imaginations, I've heard feedback that they tend to go into an imaginary world with it. And then the object of observation, even though it's clear and looks just like Buddha Shakyamuni, now there's like mountains around it. And there may be like, someone playing a flute all of a sudden, and someone offering, flowers. And it just because the animation is so prominent in the mind. So it's interesting. We all have this kind of pleasant mix of things that kind of, disallow us from getting a mind calm enough to see emptiness. And we have to figure out what our kind of bag is, what our problems are, and then work with those within the guidelines that are the same guidelines. We're trying to, not be sleepy and not be scattered. So we won't go into the details of that right now. Let's just do the breathing in and out and the counting and the Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation. Thank you all for being here today. We're so fortunate to be here, to be able to look at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment that includes everything that we'll need to know, to practice, to realize, to get rid of all of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. Should really just have a sigh of relief right now and just rejoice in this fact that among billions and billions of people, we are among the few that have presented in front of us a way to get rid of all of our suffering forever and to achieve complete bliss forever and to become the most reliable guides in the universe to be able to help all sentient beings. We'll be able to fulfill all of our needs, all of sentient beings' needs by relying on, by depending on, by practicing, by realizing exactly what's presented by Lama Tsongkhapa in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. And it's so rare to be able to have this information. So many people will never, ever even hear the word Buddha, will never even hear of a pathway that gets rid of self-grasping ignorance, will never, ever hear of bodhicitta. And it is this understanding of how to get rid of the self-grasping ignorance that allows us to get rid of all of our suffering, and the understanding of bodhicitta that allows us to have complete bliss when combined with that understanding of emptiness. So few people will ever hear of this understanding of bodhicitta and emptiness, method and wisdom. So few will hear this. And without hearing this, you'll never be able to. No one will ever be able to get rid of suffering and have bliss forever. Samsara has no beginning, but has an end. If you stop it, nirvana has a beginning, but has no end because it can't be stopped, because it only goes from cessation to cessation to cessation. There's nothing that can ever occur again to create suffering. There's nothing there once you achieve that state of cessation that can ever, ever, ever make that occur again. We're so fortunate. And once you achieve the state of Buddhahood, there's nothing that can keep you from going from bliss to bliss to bliss, from perfect wisdom to perfect wisdom, from perfect compassion to perfect compassion, perfect love to perfect love, perfect skillful means to perfect skillful means, perfect power to perfect power. And we circle in cyclic existence and are so unreliable because of these contaminations, these contaminated aggregates that we take on because of the self-grasping ignorance. Everything that we observe incorrectly. We're so fortunate that we have right here all of the things that we need in order to be free from all the things that we don't want, and we can achieve everything that we want. Buddha has only excellent qualities and abandon all negativities. Imagine being that being. And because we have Buddha nature, because all sentient beings will become Buddha, Buddha said, we will become Buddha because we're sentient beings. We have a mental consciousness that can transform from the afflicted state because it's in the nature of clear light and unsullied. These defilements, these are adventitious defilements that can be removed. Our mind can be purified. They can be distilled out of it. Even though these negativities are penetrated it, they aren't our nature. They aren't its nature. The negativities, the defilements, the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience are not the nature of our mind. So the nature of our mind is in the nature of purity and clear light. And all of these things can be removed and distilled by realizing emptiness, by realizing bodhicitta. And combining these two, we can get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. We can distill our mind and then put within our mind those things which dependently originate into, no suffering to no suffering, an absence of suffering. So you don't have any causes. So there isn't even, it's just something that is an absence there. And then the bliss itself that the Buddha experiences is dependent origination, this dependent origination of bliss to bliss to bliss. And the Arhat, even the foe destroyer, here a solitary realizer, their dependent origination of cessation to cessation to cessation, because this absence is an absence to an absence to an absence, if you will. So the suffering is no longer present for those beings and will never be present again. And that's why samsara has an end, but nirvana has a beginning but no end. because there's nothing that can un-nirvana it. And when we get to Buddhahood, there's nothing that can un-Buddhahood it. And we have the recipe right here in front of us to get to that state where there's nothing that can undo our freedom from suffering, and there's nothing that can undo our Buddhahood, and it will perpetually when we're a Buddha, be a spontaneous life where we just help sentient beings in a blissful way with ultimate love without any suffering. And we know how to love, but then we suffer. And a Buddha knows how to love, but have no suffering whatsoever, and have this immense love for every single sentient being in the universe. So imagine now Buddha Shakyamuni, who is in this fixed form, now turns into an animated being who's been containing the entire merit field. So now imagine Buddha Shakyamuni is there, animated and radiant, looking into your eyes with so much love and compassion, so happy that you're here today, and engaging in this practice, studying the stage of the path to enlightenment, studying renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness, studying the teaching shared in common with beings of the teachings for beings of three capacity, the teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity. Buddha Shakyamuni is so pleased that you're here doing this. Now imagine all the entire merit fields in the space in front of you, all the holy enlightened beings. Imagine Kensur Geshe Wandak smiling, so happy we're continuing the teachings. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo, imagining Dema Locha Rinpoche, Kensur Losang Gyatso, imagining Dema Locha Rinpoche, I'm sorry, Dema Locha Rinpoche, Geshe Dorje Damdu, Umzilla Geshe Aga, imagining Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin, Jeffrey Hopkins, Lama Allen Wallace, Shadow Rinpoche, Ani Thupten Chodron, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all these holy enlightened beings we're so fortunate to have had access to and have access to now. And we have access to even those who have passed in terms of the Dharmakaya. We're so fortunate. Now imagine all of the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga and Vasubandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyapprabha and Gunaprabha and Sirlimpa and Atisha, imagining all these holy beings that allow us to understand grounds, paths, logic, reasoning, Vinaya. We're just so fortunate to have the presentation that these beings have given that allow us to understand the pathways that Buddha taught in a clear way. And we're influenced by all of these Indian pandits as we read the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, because they're all of the meanings have been plucked from these lineages and put into these graded stages of the path. We're so fortunate. Now imagine all the beings from the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita and Arya Deva and Chandra Kirti and Shanti Deva and Chandrashita and Baba Vega and Kamala Shila, imagining these holy beings, again, imagining Lama Salingpa and Atisha, all in the space in front of you. We're so fortunate that the profound view lineage exists, and Lama Tsongkhapa was able to extract that pure view of the Madhyamaka Prasangika out of what Nagarjuna was trying to present through understanding it through Chandrakirti's clear eyes. We see the text illuminating the intent. Umagomba Rapsal, that's incredible commentary on Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way, written by Lama Tsongkhapa. We're so fortunate to have this in our world, to be able to understand Nagarjuna's view, through the Ripi Jatso, the Ocean of Reasoning, written by Lama Tsongkhapa, the Leishi Nyingpo, the Essence of Eloquence, written by Lama Tsongkhapa. We're so fortunate. All these things, all these great texts are in English for us to read. The Serting, the Golden Rosary, written by Lama Tsongkhapa about the Abhisama Alamkara. So we have connections to all the extensive deeds lineage through Serting. We have extensive in the profound view lineage. We have these incredible texts right at our fingertips that we can read. We should never forget that they exist, and we should take a look at them while we're not dead, because we don't know in our next life if we'll be able to have eyes that can see, if we'll be able to have a mind that can think, if we're not going to be covered in hair and horns, with hair with a couple of horns. We don't know. So we should take advantage of it now. And we have these things in English. And this is what I hope is reinforced by these Sunday and Thursday discussions, is that there's just an ocean of material out there. And Jayan Sheba has an ocean of material translated out there that we can look at and really get to the point where we can discern what Buddha was talking about in terms of grounds and paths. What was Buddha talking about in the ultimate view of reality when he was talking to the ones who could really discern it? What did Buddha mean ultimately? And this is, incredible that we have these works. Imagine the beings of the lineage of blessings passed down by excuse me, Vajradhara, Saraha, Matripa, Tilopa, Naropa, Lotsawa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, all these holy beings in the space in front of you. We see, Milarepa's life story was able to become a Buddha in one lifetime, but we see that there were so many imprints that he previously had. He had all of these, kind of realizations, but obstacles that were keeping him from being able to tap into previous life's imprints. And by relying on the Guru and by being tamed by the Guru Marpa, he was able to become a Buddha in one lifetime by seeing the nature of the mind and infused to see that ultimate bodhicitta. So we're so fortunate to have these teachings in our world, imagining now Drone Tompa and imagining the old Kadampa lineages, the 3 old Kadampa lineages, imagining now all the holy beings of the Nyingma, such as Padmasambhava, Sakya, such as Sakya Pandita, Satya Konganipos, Kaju, Karmapas, imagining the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtapje, Jelsapje, Panchen Sanandrapa, Bachu Jiji Jetson, Jayan Sheba, Janja Rupi Dorje, Gonchu Jimmy Wampo, the 7th Dalai Lama, imagining Jitsumba, all of Burbajo, all these incredible holy beings who've clarified these texts so that we can understand them. Imagine them in the space in front of you, imagining the highest Yoga Tantra deities, performance Tantra deities, action Tantra deities, imagining the 35 Buddhas in the space in front of you, imagining all of the protector deities, all the various, the small scope protector, medium scope protector, great scope protector, Vaishravana, Kalaputra, Dharma Raja, imagining Mahakala and Palden Lamo, all of the Dharmapalas, imagining the space in front of you. And now imagine that you bring all sentient beings here as your guests so that they can hear the teachings. Just as we said, may this teaching be proclaimed in the language of all. May I imagine that you're bringing all sentient beings here. You're connecting your mind to every single sentient being in the universe, even if it's in a contrived way. You yourself want happiness. You want to be free from suffering. We're going to learn about the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering. You want to be free from them. When you thoroughly understand this problem that we have, you definitely want to get out. And likewise, even though all sentient beings haven't necessarily heard about this, you can assume that when they do, and if they did, they would definitely want to get out as well, because of the fact that everybody wants happiness. Everybody wants freedom from suffering. Nobody wants sometimes to suffer. And nobody wants a limited happiness. Everybody wants the most happiness possible. Everybody wants to be free from suffering completely. So we know that even though people haven't recognized that there's, maybe even concluded this, hey, I just want to be 100% free from suffering and have the most happiness possible, even though they haven't concluded that, if you were to have a conversation with just about anybody who wasn't trying to be super philosophical, well, if there's no suffering, then how is there happiness? If you really just asked a general question, then you'll get that answer that, yeah, I'd like to have 100% happiness. I don't want to have suffering. When you say, oh, well, so which suffering's okay? Your mother being ripped from your life, your partner being ripped from your life, but you won't have some of the other ones? One moment of suffering, one moment of devastation just destroys all the happiness that you have. So that's not a logical way to look at it if somebody were to come back with this and say, well, it's referent. So we have to, look at what we're seeking. And then we say what we're seeking, I'm pretty sure is what everyone else is seeking. And that when I become a bodhisattva, my job is going to be to figure out how to become better and better at getting sentient beings to the truth of suchness. That's going to be my job. And then I'll be the best at it when I become a Buddha. So in order to become the best at it, we have to practice, right? We have to, practice, you're playing an instrument, you first get a guitar. It doesn't make any music. I promise. It goes bang, bang, and then you practice a little and maybe you can play like Smoke on the Water, but you certainly aren't going to play anything really that fancy. But if you didn't go bang, bang, like me right now, trying to act like a bodhisattva, it's like someone who's never played a guitar, picking it up, it's all out of tune, and they're just trying to see how you would pluck a string. How would you even be generous to a human being? How would you even do nice things all of the time? I'm failing again. And then eventually you start to make more and more music. And then eventually, I don't know what the perfect would be. You can play I don't know, somebody who can do it really, really perfectly. Nagarjuna, could play a guitar apparently without strings and make beautiful music. So I don't know, maybe he's the greatest player and we haven't heard his tracks. They're not downloadable. So maybe it's Nagarjuna's, guitar playing in this example, but I think you know what I'm getting at. We've got to break some strings. We've got to fail miserably at doing compassion, and then say, man, that wasn't compassionate. And then the next day, try to be a little bit better. And then as we do a little bit better, we do this like, our mantra is, will try to do a little bit better. I will try to do a little bit better. What's a little bit better? Look at the mirror of the Dharma. Here's what the perfect way to be would be. See if you're doing a little bit better in relation to what that says. If you're not doing a little bit better in relation to what that says, maybe you're going through a really hard time. Maybe you have physical or mental suffering going on that isn't allowing you to really practice. And Lama Tsongkhapa says right in the Lam Rim Chemo, if you have a heavy mental illness going on, heavy physical illness going on, you've got to take care of that, get that straightened out before you're going to make more advancements. So if those things are conditions going on and you're not advancing, make sure you're taking care of your mental health, because Buddhism isn't a key to all mental health issues. It's not going to just fix you. You don't just stop seeing professionals because now you're a Buddhist. I've seen this go very, very, very awry. Anyway, I don't want to get off track with that, but just make sure that you recognize that this pathway is something that is going to take some time. There's going to have to be necessary causes and conditions for your evolution. Persistence is what is going to make you change. You're going to have periods of your life maybe where there's something heavy going on, where you won't see the change taking place. But getting through that and trying to practice through that, you will then find, if you're applying worldly antidotes to the problems you're really having, like going to see a doctor, if you're trying to practice the best of your ability, even in those hard circumstances, when those illnesses are brought under control, if you will, then you'll find that your practice on the other side of it was actually evolving during that time and you didn't even realize it. So my point is, don't give up, and this stuff works. But all of that being said, if you're practicing and you aren't noticing anything change, 1 year, 5 years, I don't know, however long is too long, and nothing's happening, you've got to see if you're really using the mirror of the Dharma, or if you're just standing next to the Dharma because it looks cool to stand next to the Dharma. So I know, there was a mix of that when I first got into Buddhism. I was in rock bands, as many of you know, and famous people who like Adam Yauch and the Beastie Boys, who was an incredible practitioner and became kind of a friend. I wanted to stand next to what they were standing next to a little, although I had been seeking a truth. It was kind of cool that I found something that was cool to stand next to. And then that kind of shed, and I realized that there was nothing I could just stand next to that was going to change me. And that the only thing that was going to change me is if I asked the person I was going to stand next to a question, or if I listened to what they were teaching and put that teaching into practice. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to work. Just the standing next to. I heard a story recently that, this person who stayed next to their guru their whole life, never asked a question. And then the guru died, and then the guru answered their questions, in some mystical form. Okay. I would ask your teacher the question now. I wouldn't rely on some mystical story. I would ask your teacher the question now. I would listen to everything that they have to say, exactly what they're saying right now. I would go back and I'd analyze what they say. I would look at the Lam Rim Chemo right now and say, oh my God, I don't understand what that means. And then I would go ask somebody who might know what it means. That would be my suggestion. So just imagine you bring all sentient beings here. Hell, hungry ghost, animal, human beings, demigods, and gods, leaving out none, even 10th ground bodhisattvas. Bring everybody here who has any kind of afflictive obstruction to omniscience that they need to get rid of. And imagine you're bringing them here to get them to whatever their next stage necessary is to be closer to Buddhahood. So just this is the best we can do, right? We could think in like big ways, but just imagine you bring everybody here and they're going to hear whatever it is they need to hear. And the reason they're going to hear whatever it is they need to hear is because we say we're going to proclaim it in the language of all. And we're, going to hope that this special blessing, if, the Buddha at the Heart Sutra could bless Shariputra and, and Chenrezig and turn them into puppets, maybe somehow there can be a manipulation of sound that, because the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are here and hearing our intention, that can take place. Or maybe they can act as like the interpreter because they can proclaim it. They can actually do what I'm hoping that I can do. So it's kind of funny when we think of that, Buddhas, could you be my interpreter, please? Because I can't proclaim this in the language of all. I'm not a reliable guide, but I'm doing my best. It's kind of like going back to the breaking guitar strings. I'm doing my best. And, anybody who finds fault with that, I don't know. So anyway, not that anybody's finding fault. That's not my point. I'm just saying. So now imagine you brought all sentient beings here. And before we get started, I'd like to read again from Meditation on Emptiness. We've been talking, and if anybody who's been following this, you're learning how these incredible masters taught to really, really meditate on emptiness. And when we look at the source material that Jeffrey Hopkins uses, and in terms of oral tradition, and in terms of all the texts that he used to refer to, we see Janja, and we Kensei Lichten, and we see Jayan Sheba, and then we'll see Pabunka Rinpoche for certain things, and all Ngawan Leiden. It's just incredible, the sources that the fifth Dalai Lama's Sacred Words of Manjushri, Kirtub J's manual instructions on the view, Lengpa Rinpoche's oral instructions. Just to give you a flavor of where this information's coming from. It's not just coming from out of nowhere. It's coming from these incredible, incredible lamas. And Jeffrey Hopkins was able to take this language and take this and compile it into this meditation that is so clear and concise and is exactly how, Rinpoche would explain to meditate on emptiness. And how all the great masters explain to meditate on emptiness. So we first talked about establishing how does the I naturally appear. So this is where we left at, and so we start to ask ourselves this question, and we came up with how we would naturally just have this kind of idea of mind the idea of I come about, because it says, the fifth Dalai Lama says, in the end of the appearance of the I and the appearance of the mind and body are as if they are mixed like milk and water, undifferentiable. But it's clear, it's so clear as to seem graspable with the hand. So when you do this identification, identifying the object negated in the theory of selflessness, you have to identify what this whole concrete self is that you feel naturally occurs. You're not analyzing it. You're just seeing how it naturally comes about when you see I. Yeah, it feels like it's this whole unit here, I. But then as soon as I start to get out of that natural feeling of, okay, I, that's this whole thing, and I say, what about the I feel like it starts to separate us a little bit. I feel it. I don't know about you, but this is just my meditation. I feel that when I get the natural I up, and then I just kind of have it, I'm observing it, and then sometimes it kind of moves around and stuff. It's very interesting that as soon as I put a little grip on it, there's like an there's something, there seems to be something that is I that isn't just this. So, can it appear self-established if it's mixed? If it's mixed, but then it's self-established. So this is the conundrum that starts to happen. So first, you're just identifying what the natural appearance of this I is. Truly established. Seems like there's a selfhood. So then we see that it seems truly existent, ultimately existent, existed from its own side. These are all the things that we come to be able to label what we feel it is later as hypothetical synonyms of the I that, of the I. Hypothetical because I doesn't, in the way that we perceive it, this self-sufficient I doesn't inherently exist. But we first come to this conclusion of this I that we think about is us, and then we start to work with that. You can't, you have to identify what it is you need to take apart in order to take it apart. So now you've kind of identified what you're going to take apart. And then this meditation starts to get into the meditation, which is called the four essentials to discern emptiness. So I don't know that it's labeled as this in here, but it's clearly what is being presented here in terms of, some of the points that are being made. So there's something that has to be figured out. There has to be ascertaining the selflessness that follows from reasoning. So now you've identified this self that naturally appears to be objectively existent and inherently existent, just naturally appears that way. And now you're going to see if it's true or not. And then you're going to ascertain the opposite of selfhood, selflessness, through the reason that it's this I that appears to me as objectively existent isn't, because of dependent origination. And then you're going to use these reasons to start to understand and negate the object first. So you start to come up with the object of negation. It's a thoroughly established, truly established, intrinsically existent, objectively existent I, this appearing I, that it has existence from its own side, this I. And then you have to understand, is the object one with its parts? Okay, so, or is it separate from its parts? So you start to investigate this. And then you understand that anything that's empty of being one with its parts and different from its parts is empty of objective existence. So you start to investigate this I that's coming up that seems so real, so objectively existent. Okay, there's only two options. It's either one with the parts, the aggregates, mind, body, the five form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. It's either one with those or something separate. Right? So it's got to be able to be findable if it's objectively existent, if it has some sort of findability from its own side. So let me then read this. So this gets into the four essentials to discern emptiness, but also gets into the sevenfold reasoning. But it starts with the kind of fourfold analysis by way of the two. Okay, ascertaining that selflessness follows from the reason. The second of the three basic steps in meditation on the personal selflessness is the ascertainment that if the I exists the way it is conceived. Okay, so we've just conceived a way an I exists. We've come up with it. How does it naturally exist? Okay, so the second step is now, does it exist the way that it appears? It's appearing this way. Is it true or not? So here we go. Here we're off to the races of analysis. It appears this way. Is it true? Is the way that it appears true? Is it tally with reality? So we have to say, that does it exist the way it is conceived? If it's true, then it must be either the same entity as the mental and physical aggregates or a different entity from those aggregates. So it should be findable. If it's objectively existent, as Nagarjuna says in the Precious Garland, if the mirage appearing as water from those far away were really water, then those nearby would see water. So when we see this naturally appearing I from afar, we aren't questioning, that just appears as objectively existent. As we move closer to it, we should find more objective existence. We should find certainty of objective existence. So if this thing inherently exists, just like the mirage that looks like it's water from afar, when you move closer to it, you find out it's not water. So if this thing that appears to be objectively existent we should be able to move closer towards this self of person that objectively exists and find it. So now we start the experiment. That's what Buddha says. We start experimenting on this I, this naturally occurring I that always appears this way. It appears like me. I think it's me. I prick my finger and that hurt me. That's me too. My fingers me, my toes me, my breathing's me. But then when I start to really investigate it, sandcastles start to wash away in terms of me being able to hold on to the truth of what's appearing. And the truth of what's appearing is not seen, because what's appearing to me is conventional, and conventional truth is called concealed truth. It's deceptive. It's concealing what's really true. And that's the lack of inherent existence of the object, the emptiness of the object, that the object doesn't have any of the ness-ness that you're giving it, doesn't have any independent inherent existence. The I doesn't have that. But we have to find out if it's true or not. So this is the investigation we're doing. It has to be either one with or separate. It has to be the same entity of the mental and physical aggregates or different entity. If the I inherently exists, it must be either inherently the same entity as the aggregates or inherently a different entity from the aggregates. Sameness and difference of entity are mutually exclusive. If two things exist, they must be either the same or different. Think about it. They have to be the same or different if two things exist. They must be either the same or different. If the I is found to be neither inherently the same entity as the mind and body, nor different entity from them, then the I does not inherently exist. This is incredible. We see that we establish an object of negation. We see if the I is one with its parts, something findably separate from its parts. And if it's not one or separate from its parts, it's not a findable objective existence. Therefore, objective existence doesn't exist. It's a non-affirming negative, an absence of objective existence. Nothing is put in its place except the absence of that thing occurring as objective existence. It is the I or the person is merely an imputation on the aggregates, the basis of designation. Mere imputation of thought. That's how it subjectively exists. Yet I think there's something independent, inherently existent here that is separate from the mere designation of thought on a basis of designation. I feel that there is, some inherently existent, some separate, independent I that's separate from just this thought that's labeling I on a basis of designation of aggregates, a collection. Then the collection has no inherent existence from its own side. So it's not like I'm properly deciding that this I is me because my aggregates have some Jeffness. The aggregates have no inherent existence, in any way, shape, or form either to have Jeffness to them. So this is all just mere designation through thought, mere imputation. Wow. Heart Sutra.
Can you share screen, please?
I certainly can share a screen. But the screen and the sharing of the screen and the sharer and the person asking me to share and the name Lorinda are all empty of inherent existence because they dependently originate. Mere imputation of thought. Rinpoche was so skilled. The Heart Sutra, the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way, he saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind, consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death. No end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth. Since there is no deception, the Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. So the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Bodhisoha, Buddhahood. This is how we achieve Buddhahood, is in dependence upon this mantra of recognizing first the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, including the pathways that this mantra implicitly presents. But this mantra talks about Teata Om. First, Gate is referring to the path of accumulation. Second, Gate to the path of preparation. Paragate to the path of seeing. Parasangate to the path of meditation. And Bodhisoha to the path of no more learning. And the Om at the head of it, we can look at it as three syllables within the Sanskrit as Auma, which stands for body, speech, and mind. So we could look at it as the completely pure body, speech, and mind of the Buddha that's achieved at Bodhisoha. And then we can also look at it in terms of our body, speech, and mind, and use it as the mirror of the Dharma, that Om, to assess our Longayi, Sum, our body, speech, and mind, and then assess whether our body, speech, and mind has achieved bodhicitta in terms of the Mahayana. If we've achieved bodhicitta, do we have a union of calm abiding and special insight? If we have that, have we seen emptiness directly? If we have that, have we seen emptiness directly again and again and again and again and again? So these are the things that will occur through these pathways that we're talking about. And this is the mirror of the Dharma, once again, in just one little mantra for us to say, Teata, Om, okay, Om, that's me, that's the Buddha. The Buddha's pure body, speech, and mind. I don't have pure body, speech, and mind. The Buddha got to pure body, speech, and mind through Gate, Paragate, Parasangati, Bodhisoha. The Bodhisoha being the pure body, speech, and mind. The Buddha once had impure Om, body, speech, and mind, like my body, speech, and mind is impure. And through going through Gate, Paragate, Parasangati, Bodhisoha, the Buddha achieved, through going through Gate, Paragati, Parasangati, the Buddha achieved Bodhisoha with the same kind of messed up, contaminated, defiled mental consciousness. Likewise, our Om right now is defiled, like Buddha Shakyamuni's Om was defiled, with the body, speech, and mind being have the defilements. But if we then go through Gate, Paragate, Parasangate, path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, we can achieve Bodhisoha, Buddhahood, just like Buddha Shakyamuni did. There's no secret recipe. There's nothing being withheld. There's merely the nature of reality that we're withholding from ourselves every moment because we're seeing things so deceptively all of the time. So it's really important that we understand that this mantra implicitly is referring to those 5 Mahayana paths, but then recognizing that the explicit meaning of this is about the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, and then not cling to that, oh, somehow these paths are inherently existent, and this is the real deal. This is the objective existence. Finally, I found the real thing. That's the problem. I found Buddhism. It's the real thing. Careful with that grasping. This is the real one. That's the real. That's not the real one. The way you look and figure out real or not is by logic and reasoning. And that's how you decide real. You cut and rub it. You use the acid test. You put it to the acid test, and then you see, okay, this is accurate. This isn't accurate. So we can all achieve Bodhisoha, and we can logically come to that conclusion. And Dharmakirti does an incredible job in the 2nd chapter of the Pramanavartikakarika in showing how this consciousness can evolve, and he establishes omniscience, establishes Buddhahood. So Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha. 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 Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi, praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, "Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice." When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Agasamara Jashandara Samara, Deata Ongatekate, Paragate, Prasangate, Bodhisoa, Papa Conchusanjikai, Nevidoji, Lobodoji, Mebodoji, Shivadoji, Dagi Vaji, Metubishi, Daji, Korea Soha, get into Jaji, Shiwada, Midun, New Age, and Androada, Tumbajun, Jimbon, Son Georgi, Daji, Dejan, and other leisure. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanje Jadan Zaji Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jasuchi Dagi Juse Juji Sonanji Jola Benja Sanje Jubajo Sanje Jadan Zaji Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jasuchi Dagi Juse Jibe Sonanji Jola Benja Sanje Jubajo Sanje Jadan Zaji Janan La Janju Badu Dani Jasuchi Dagi Juse Jibe Sonanji Jola Benja Sanje Jubajo. From Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika Karika, enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Sachen Kongan Nimpos, departing from the four attachments. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there's no bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you do not have the view. Okay. So sorry for the long introduction, but this is material I was thinking about right before class that I felt was important when we're dealing with the object of negation, and we're dealing with the naturally appearing I, and then we're dealing with is the naturally appearing I the same as or separate from its parts, and we start to be able to unravel this grasping at an objective existence that, you know, isn't tally with the way things are. It's not real. I mean, it just, you can logically come to the conclusion that the way that things appear and the way that we believe them to be isn't accurate. The way they appear to us isn't accurate. They appear to have this solid inherent existence from their own side. And even though they exist, they don't exist the way that we think they do. And we can see how the over-exaggeration that occurs from believing that things have this objective reality causes all of our problems. I mean, just think about it just for a minute. As you know, I was taking a shower and thinking about all of the absurd things that I exaggerate as being so important. And then I think about how silly someone else would think that thing I think is so important is. Doesn't matter. You know, pick your own examples. So, and I was thinking how someone could get to the point where they could exaggerate an object. Okay, so we say that, you know, based on things that you find, you have an object that inherently exists. You feel that it has objective existence. Then you say, okay, this thing that's out there is really pleasant, okay? Or this thing that's out there is really unpleasant. I've either got to run towards it or run away from it. But then there's this, the neutral, right? You know, this ignorance is just there all the time where everything I see and I believe has inherent existence, okay? So imagine, I mean, and some of you maybe do this, I don't know. But I was just thinking about like, okay, I love food. I'm really rich. I think that somehow that plate of food could cost, I don't know, there's like plates of food that are thousands and thousands of dollars that are merely ingredients put together that are named as something maybe in French collection that now somebody not me, but I do with other stuff, but this is so extreme, I had to bring it up. Somebody has decided that, okay, yeah, this is really good. Okay, it's got a French name, it's got all these ingredients put together. These are really rare, these are hard to get. And now somehow someone's willing to pay thousands of dollars to, in 24 hours, poop. That's how smart we are. This is the exaggeration of the object. Now take your thing that you love so much, the guitar collectors that don't even know how to play a guitar. They have to, this one's got the year that has this special thing that had the this and that. Can you play it? No, I don't even know how to play guitar. They've exaggerated this object so much that this even lost what the thing's supposed to do. It's a collector item now. It's just lost. It went from being a thing that some, maybe guy on the corner when they bought it and it was cheap. Like it was just trying to get money for change in. And it was a musical instrument named as that. This was this guy's way to get $1 a day. Now somehow or another, it's not even played. Can't play it. It's a piece. And this object is just the same object. And it's just changed and been bent all these different ways. By whom? The subject. Boom. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. It starts out as appearing so real. And then the subject goes to town and we have our own individual kind of karmas and stuff and affinities and habituations from past lives. We really liked something before. Now we really kind of like it more, or something like, we didn't like before because, someone, I don't know. Karma is really complicated. Who could even begin to figure it out? But look at it, everybody. Look at how we live our lives. Look at how we place value on pieces of metal that have different emblems on them. And we exaggerate their qualities because of emblems, because of labels. The same bag can cost $5,000 if it has labels on it. But the same thing, just all it does is carry stuff. But we can create all this exaggeration because of the fact that we think it's objectively real. Really? You're standing away from a mirage and you're really thirsty and you really know it's a mirage. Are you going to run after it to go get a glass of water? Or are you going to look elsewhere? So clear. So we're barely going to get into Lama Tsongkhapa's text today, but I don't think you're going to find anything that I said today that's going to not tally with what Lama Tsongkhapa has to say. And if there is, I would like you to point it out to me, because I'm always trying to make my view more accurate. So, because if there's grasping, you don't have the view. If you don't have the view, you have no way to exit out of samsara. You will just exit out of this body into another set of appropriated aggregates, like we talked about, last week when we talked about finished up the 8 types, or the week before, the 8 types of some suffering. And we looked at the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, meeting with the unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, not getting what you want, and the suffering of the appropriated aggregates. So we looked over that so clearly, and we see that we're being forced again and again and again into these kind of parts that are contaminated, that at least have the pervasive compounded suffering as a component. And in the, our realm, we have suffering of change, pervasive compounded suffering. And this is all because of one terrible thing. And it's the self-grasping ignorance. There it is again, that thinks that a plate of food could be worth thousands of dollars. That thinks that this plate of food objectively exists. So it's inappropriate attention starts and I'm off to the races. This is how it all occurs. And it all goes back over and over and over again to the same thing. It doesn't, the funny thing is it doesn't change. But it's so hard for us to see the truth, and we have to have the truth embedded in us over and over again. So Nagarjuna in the Fundamental Wisdom in the Middle Way says, ceasing of karma and afflictions leads to nirvana. Karma and afflictions arise from conceptual thought. These arise from mental elaborations, grasping at true existence. Elaboration ceases by emptiness or into emptiness. So From the self-grasping ignorance, elaborations, comes conceptual thought, inappropriate attention, exaggeration of the object. From that comes the afflictions, attachment, hatred, ignorance. From that comes contaminated karmas, actions, non-virtuous and actions and contaminated virtuous actions. And from contaminated causes come contaminated results. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. All phenomena are in the nature, all contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. All phenomena are empty and selfless. Nirvana is peace. So the fact that we see them as not empty and selfless, we have the cause, which is contaminated, to give rise to suffering. Full stop. So we have these 6 sufferings now we're going to talk about. We'll do 5 minutes or so in the Lamrim Chemo, and then we'll move on. So we've gone through the introduction section. We went through the greatness of the teacher, greatness of the teaching, went through the how to listen to and explain the teaching, and we went through how to lead students through the actual instructions in terms of looking at it for the 4 divisions of the Lamrim Chemo. And we know we're in how to lead students through the actual instructions section. We know we've completed the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity that go over relying on a teacher, human life of leisure and opportunity, death and impermanence, reflecting on future lives, going for refuge, karma, applying the karma and its results, applying the 4 opponent powers. And we know from Rinpoche's teachings that he always pointed out Atisha's quote from The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment: understand there are persons of 3 capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly to identify their characteristics. And the teachings for beings of small capacity that rely on those subjects just mentioned allow one to have freedom from the lower realms of cyclic existence of the hell, hungry ghost, and animal. So one day and night engages in the practices that allow him or her to not have suffering in the lower realms of cyclic existence. And what he or she does, as Rinpoche said a gajillion times, is rely on the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, goes for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and acknowledges one's downfalls. And in dependence upon these practices, one can have freedom from the lower realms of cyclic existence. So we covered all of those topics contained within the small scope, teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity. And now we're on the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity, where we learn how to get out of cyclic existence altogether. We find the presentation of the 4 Noble Truths. We find the presentation of the 4 Seals. We find the presentations of the essence of dependent origination mantra. All phenomena arise from causes. The causes are taught by the Tathagata. The cessation of causes as well are taught by the Great Seer. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. All phenomena are empty and selfless. Nirvana is peace. This is the superior truth of suffering. This is the superior truth of origin. This is the superior truth of cessation. This is the superior truth of path. Cessation is to be, the suffering is to be identified. Origin is to be abandoned. Cessation is to be achieved, and path is to be meditated upon. There is no suffering to identify. There is no origin to abandon. There is no cessation to achieve, and there is no path to rely upon. If you know how to put those together, you'll understand the medium scope. You know how to put the 4 Seals, the essence of dependent origination mantra, and the 4 Noble Truths, and the 12 points about the 4 Noble Truths. We can put all of those together. You really will understand the medium scope, the 3 highest higher trainings that lead to your ability to see emptiness directly over and over again, and uncontaminate your virtues, and be able to achieve in the medium scope an abiding nirvana, a Hinayana nirvana, the hearer's solitary realizer vehicle. So we can do this. So here we find the presentation of the 4 Noble Truths. First truth is the truth of suffering. And all the great masters say that nobody spends time on this. People think that they kind of get it. They don't meditate on it enough, and their force of their perseverance isn't there in their lives because they haven't meditated on death and impermanence enough. They may have meditated on death in a fancy way, but not really meditated on death and impermanence and what the ramifications of my death are. The ramifications of my death is that I will take on another set of appropriated aggregates. I don't know where they'll be. I might be a cow. I might be a slug. I might be a hell being. I might be a god, but I will be forced again and again and again into these set of aggregates. And when we look at it in terms of the 12 links in the human realm, it's easier to talk about it in terms of desire realm, human realm. I will be forced again and again to take on, these kind of sets of contaminated things because of the ignorance that grasps at things as being truly established. Sorry, I lost my track, but let me get into the 6 sufferings. So the 6 types of suffering, the fault of uncertainty, the fault of insatiability, the fault of casting off bodies repeatedly, the fault of repeated rebirth, the fault of repeatedly descending from the high to the low, and the fault of having no companions. So we see that these are all things that, okay, I can meditate on death. I'm going to die, and at my time of death, this is what I'll do, and get familiar and get comfortable with dying. Just getting comfortable with dying doesn't really produce renunciation. Renunciation is produced from meditating on all of these other types of suffering and recognizing that when you're ejected, in the 12 links, it's called birth, when you actually are ejected, from this body, this ejection into the next body. So you have aging and death, and then you're ejected. This is where the problem starts. Okay, you were good with death. Now you're dead. Now you're ejected into a new set of aggregates. That's the problem, is now you're ejected into a new set of contaminated aggregates. Where am I? Where am I being ejected to? And then we see I'm potentially, and if I don't stop samsara, will definitely eventually be ejected into birth, aging, sickness, death, having loved ones ripped from me, meeting with things that are unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, meeting with the unpleasant, not getting what I want, the suffering of the appropriated aggregates, and now the suffering of the uncertainty of cyclic existence, this just uncertainty of what's going to happen, the insatiability, casting off these bodies over and over again, repeatedly having to be reborn. And you look at the description of birth in the Lamrim Chemo, and you see this suffering, and you're going to have to go from the high realm to the low realm. And when you're in the lowest realms, you won't be able to practice Dharma. And when you're in the highest high realms, it'll be too good and you won't practice Dharma. And then you won't have anyone to go with you. We think of this life, oh, I'm okay to die. My loved ones are here. This 6th problem is that you have no companions. You're ejected out of this body. You had companions. Now death happens. Now there's an ejection that takes place. This ejection is a solo flight, solo ejection. And now you're being forced into another set of aggregates, and you have to relate to a whole new set of beings who you will then cling to as permanent, unitary, independent, substantially existent, inherently existent, intrinsically existent. And then they'll be ripped from you, and then you'll suffer. And the cycle will go on and on and on again. So it's not about just being okay with I'm going to die. It's death will come. Nothing can stop it. I don't know when I'm going to die. The only thing that can help is Dharma. And what do you mean the only thing that can help is Dharma? Well, you're going to be ejected into any among the 8, 6, or 3 sufferings. 100%. That's a statement that can be true. You will be ejected into any among the 8, 6, or 3 types of suffering. 100%. So it's our familiarity with what these are that intensifies our desire to definitely emerge and makes it something real that isn't just theater, that is something that you can taste, like vomit in your mouth, when you think of wanting to go get another thing. Because you know that other thing is just another thing, and it's really powerful, and it starts to loosen all of the mess and untighten your heart and allow you to loosen it a little to be able to help a little more. So when we know what we're up against in a complete way, then we can definitely want to emerge and put in the effort that'll be needed to get out of these things that we don't want. And then we'll really know what others are up against. And then by knowing what they're really up against, then we'll start to generate more and more compassion for them. And then our self-cherishing attitude starts to lessen. And it's all just kind of a beautiful recipe that, is completed when you are a Buddha. And that's what is just so encouraging, that even though when this stuff gets hard, and, all times in my life, I haven't, been the greatest practitioner, but I've always kept trying. And that's made all of the difference. And I just hope that you can take these meditations, because everything in this book is a meditation. Everything the Buddha taught is a meditation. You easily understand the conqueror's intent and understand that all teachings are instructions for practice. It's the first two greatnesses of the teaching, and I just really just want to say thank you to Khenser Geshe Wandak for showing me how great this stuff really is, and convincing me really of how great it is. And I hope that if you're not convinced yet, you don't give up before you are convinced, and don't become convinced because I seem sincere. Become convinced because you've done the acid test on your own mind, please. I don't care who says what. Test it, check it. Look at what the great scholars, look at what Panchen Sonandrapa, Jayan Sheba, look at what Jitsumba Chuji Jetson says. Look at what all these great scholars say. Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti. Look at what Baba Vega says. The Chandrakirti and Baba Vega. Chandrakirti is not very happy with what Baba Vega has to say in his writings. And you could see the way that Baba Vega wrote, when he did. He was very just like, try me. And he was a holder of the Svatantrika Madhyamika view on paper, not the Prasangika view. And Chandrakirti went hard at him for, really misunderstanding some of the points of that, Nagarjuna was trying to make, and went right at him with Nagarjuna quotes, because he knew that any of the followers left of Baba Vega couldn't, go against, what Nagarjuna had to say. So he would, Chandrakirti just takes quotes that, fly in the face of what Baba Vega says from Nagarjuna, because he knows that Nagarjuna is Baba Vega's teacher. So he just, stomps out, illogical things merely by quoting Baba Vega's teacher. And it's not like he has to interpret anything. It's just black and white what Nagarjuna says in a lot of cases, that, you don't need a rocket scientist or a magnifying glass to go, you got that wrong. But without all of these tools, you'll never, ever see these subtle points. No chance. Unless you're like real super special, you can ride with that for a while. Like the specialness of me that doesn't need as much kind of a like real thorough looking at all these big books because of some karma. But thankfully, I'm way over that. Prayer for the flourishing of Jitsun Kappa's teachings. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's Dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Indraketa, he made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring, praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. That a lineage of pure view and conduct might spread. He offered a white crystal rosary to the sage who gave him a conch and prophesied, through this truth, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. His pure view, free of eternity or destruction, his pure meditation, cleansed of dark, fading, and fog, his pure conduct, practiced according to the conqueror's orders, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Learned, since he extensively sought out learning, reverent, rightly applying it to himself, good, dedicating it all for beings and doctrine, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Through being sure that all scriptures, definitive and interpretive, were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Listening to the explanations of the three Pitakas, realized teachings, practice of the three highest higher trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the two stages practice, he allied without clash the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish, combining voidness, explaining as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle, hard essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish by the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the three beings past, the quick-acting Lord Vaishravana Karmayana. May the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverent holders of the teaching, and by the increase of power of its patrons, may the conqueror Lozang's teachings flourish. And I share this with you about trying to develop a desire to definitely emerge, because I focused on that 3-step death meditation and focused a lot on death will come, nothing can stop it. We don't know when we're going to die, and the 3 reasons for each of those. And then nothing can help but Dharma was the thing I focused the least on initially, not these days, not years now, but initially was just the death is coming, and that's helpful so you're not shocked when it happens. But just not being shocked when it happens, all that's going to happen is I'm not shocked, and your mind brings about what you have more familiarization with in this life, and brings up some sort of karma, and then you're just ejected. And I really, as years have gone by, have found it so important to link that death, I'm going to die, and this comfort with dying, as comfortable as I could be. I'm probably going to scream and cry, right? If it was right now, getting as comfortable as I can be, but recognizing that that's an uncomfortable situation because it means that I no longer know if I have a chance to practice Dharma. That's the thing, you're supposed to, nothing can help but Dharma. The death meditation is supposed to force you into renunciation, not supposed to just make you comfortable with it. And I used it as a tool to make myself comfortable with it early on. And then one day saw that wasn't inspiring me enough, clearly. And it clicked. And then I looked at it differently. I don't have renunciation, but something else occurred than was. Whatever that is, when we have these little baby steps and we're like, ooh, and they're like so small. But when we're little practitioners, we're not looking for like, I have calm abiding now. We're looking for these little glimmers of hope. And I've had so many of those little glimmers happen that I just keep coming back for more so that I can eventually see that, that reality the Buddha sees, eventually. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrava to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes I've made, may they be purified by this Vajrasattva mantra. I'm imagining that white, red, and blue syllables are raining down from the sky, coming from Vajrasattva, inseparable from your root deity. And these syllables are Om, purifying yours and all sentient beings' body, and white Oms, blue red Ahs. When I try to go fast, I just mess it up. Red Ahs showering down on you and all sentient beings, purifying you and all sentient beings' speech, and blue Homs showering down on you and all sentient beings. And purifying your minds, so body, speech, and mind. Om, Ah, Hom, white, red, blue, in that order. So just imagine Vajrasattva is purifying. You're being purified. And any mistakes I made, I apologize. Om benza sato samayam anabhalaya benza sato zaino vajita didameva sutukayameva subukayameva anaragdameva zavazidime bracha zavagamasujime ginyam jian kuru ma bhagavan zavatataka benza mamemoka benza baba mahasamaya sapa ahom fe. We always be protected by Paul and Lamo. Jarama 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 jijikalar jimorama jidaja jinjarudang yang 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 Jarama 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 Jigalar and Rama Jajin Jurang Yang Jarama 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 Jigalar and Rama Jajin Jurang Yang Jarama 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 Jigalar and Rama Jajin Jurang Yang Jarama 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 Jinjagalar Rajama Rama Jajin Jurang. Any obstacles that you have to meeting with the Dharma, may they be quickly removed from this mantra. And Drapu Sundri, the 3 wrathful protectors. Om Vajrapani Hayagriva Garuda Om Ve. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. And now a prayer for a supplication to Kensur Geshe Wandak. And as you study emptiness, make sure you still can show that things exist. This is not a nihilistic tradition. Madhyamaka Prasangika are not nihilists. Make sure you can still posit existence in your meditation. A Complex Yogi Poses as a Simple Monk by me. I forgot who wrote it. Homage to Kensei Geshe Wandak, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, music, and food purified by Om Ahom. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you. Place the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. Teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. The spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize bodhicitta and the correct renunciation, the correct bodhicitta and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. I really encourage all of you to investigate the nature of reality and to thoroughly investigate it. Shantideva says, if, seeing emptiness is the only way to freedom, what else is there to do? And this is the great Bodhisattva Shantideva, who wrote the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. So even, as a Bodhisattva, who puts others' beings before their own, the only thing for them to do is to see the truth of suchness, so that they can know exactly what it is, so that they can show others. And that's the only way they can really help them. So thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate all of you. We'll see you next time. See you on Thursday, right? Thursday at 7:30. We're doing the 3 moralities. See you. Happy Sunday.